Hey guys, I'm back. It's another episode of Galaxy Brain TFT. I am ggDoA, your host. With me this week this episode, I guess, it's been a couple weeks because we've given people time. We had to give people time to get used to the 3.5 patch, right? But anyway, I digress. With me is thatsPRIMAL, someone who should be well known to the TFT community at this point. Fantastic player, releases a lot of really useful guides. I'm psyched to have you on the show. How's it going?
It's going great, man. Happy to be here.
Cool. All right. So, as if some of you have seen the show before, you know that the first thing we do is talk a bit about the player on the show and their background, their history in gaming, and all that. So, I know that you worked for Riot previously, but let's go back farther than that. Like, what got you into video games to begin with, and kind of like led to all this?
Oh man. Okay,
We're
so
going
I've
way
been
back.
playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going way back. Okay, so I've been playing games pretty much as long as I can remember. I think some of my earliest memories are playing games. And I started out with a Super Nintendo,
All right.
which we returned like the next day because I was like, Dad, it's actually Nintendo 64. Can get that instead.
Okay.
So there started my lifelong love affair with games, and at first it was just sort of like single player games, both because those were the sort of the big games at the time, and that's sort of what I had access to. And then as I got older, once I got into, I would say high school, I started playing like, LANs with my friends, games like Halo, Smash, etc. And then I started getting really into online multiplayer, specifically strategy games in around high school.
Okay.
And I would say the first strategy game that I got super deep into was the game called Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, which a lot of people don't know.
I've heard of it, but I had never really played it that much, I admit.
Oh man, it was so good. It was so good, but it wasn't well supported. Like it had a lot of technical issues, so the servers were always going down and stuff. And you'd sit there for 8 hours and get like 4 games total. But it was a really fun game.
Movie-based, IP-based games didn't really get the support that they should get really most of the time.
Yeah. I was like, if Blizzard had made this game, I'd still be playing it to this day. But yeah. So I went from that into StarCraft 2.
Okay.
I got super into StarCraft 2. I think friends introduced me. I don't even know, how did I get into StarCraft 2? I think I was in college and I was an intern, and I heard that beta for StarCraft 2 was coming out, and I knew people had regarded Brood War super highly. So I gave it a try and was hooked.
Okay.
Played a ton of that. Got to Masters Protoss, which I guess was the second highest rank at the time. And got really into esports, so started organizing tournaments for fun. Started a company called Well Played that would organize tournaments for StarCraft, and then eventually League of Legends.
And that's where I originally remember you from.
Yeah,
Well Played from way back in the day. Yeah,
way back in the day. Yeah.
That's a name that should bring back a lot of positive memories for the StarCraft 2 scene, because you guys put on some of the best events, I think, that came from the community in StarCraft 2.
Thanks. Yeah, it was sort of just something where a bunch of us who all met online, came together and had various skills, and we're like, hey, we think we can put on some pretty dope StarCraft tournaments. And yeah, one thing led to another, and eventually I interned at Riot, partially because of my connections due to creating tournaments in the space. And right before that, I got super into League. Once my friends who I started Well Played with got into League, they brought me into the fold. And then thousands of hours later, I was at Riot, and then I was at Riot for 7 years doing esports the entire time. So working on League of Legends Summoner's Rift the entire time. And then last year, I made a big jump, and I hit Challenger multiple times in TFT, and I felt like, hey, you know what? I feel like it's time to sort of bet on myself and take a big risk in my life. So I left to pursue a dream of trying to go pro. So going pro means for me producing content, streaming, and competing in tournaments. So I'm about 2.5 months into that journey.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a huge change to make, going from, and this is a change a lot of us in esports have made, maybe multiple times, going from something stable to something completely, quote unquote crazy to a lot of people who would look at that. But something that, as we know in the scene, if you put in the work, you've got the talent, like you can really make it work. So 2.5 months in, what are your first impressions? Obviously, 2.5 months is not a lot of time. It's a small sample size as far as results go, so you can't draw a huge amount of conclusions. But how's it going so far, in your opinion?
I think it's going okay. I mean, I think I always want it to be going better than it is. I think that's sort of
Naturally.
human nature, right?
Any
But when
competitive gamer would say that, yes.
exactly. When I look at things objectively, competitively, it's not going as well as I thought it would. And I think part of it
Hmm.
is because the pressure is just higher. You know, it's one thing when I'm playing a game for fun and I have my job. It's another thing when I'm like, okay, I'm all in on this thing and now this is my livelihood.
Yeah.
So I think the pressure has gotten a little bit to me, and I've managed to reach challenger, but less consistently than when I was actually working, which was sort of the whole thesis was, okay, I'm doing well and I was like top 50 while maintaining a job. I was like, okay, if I go all in, I think I can be one of the best, if
Hmm.
not the best. Um, so competitively, you know, if I've had a little bit of success. Like I won a tournament, Giant Slayers Fight Night. I was super excited about that. I've gotten reasonably far in the Team Liquid qualifiers, but definitely want to be doing better and just being disciplined about treating it like any craft where, you know, you play and you review and you train, you know,
Hmm.
not just treat it as a hobby, has been one of the bigger growth points for me. And then on the streaming and content side, that's actually surprisingly going really well. People are really receptive to the content that I've been putting out, and I would say like I'm a medium-sized streamer in the TFT community. You know, pretty recognized, which is cool. So yeah, people have been super supportive overall. I know no matter what, I feel good about the decision to go on this path. I know I
Awesome.
would have regretted if I didn't try, and I've given myself about a year to make it happen. At a year, once we get to that point, I'll reevaluate and figure out whether this makes sense to keep pursuing. But so far, so good.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show is because, full disclosure, you're part of like a little play group that I'm a part of in TFT where we swap a lot of strategies. We talk a lot about the game when we're not playing it and all that. And you are one of the most studious people I know as far as dissecting the game and analyzing it from every degree. So I know we're going to have like a lot of really good conversation about the games we're going to see today. But I have one more question before we really get started with the games, and I'm sure it's a question a lot of people have too. So the face paint, what is the story behind the face paint? And the ID, you know, the thing is, and maybe they're connected, but
Yeah,
I always ask, what's the story behind the ID? But in this case, I have even more to learn about
yeah,
because there's
yeah.
an appearancing that goes along with it. So what's the story?
Yeah, it's like I've been sitting here for 5 minutes with this face paint on, and people are like,
But anyone
"What's
who
going
watches your
on here?"
stream is
Right?
familiar with that. But yeah, talk about it.
True,
Yeah.
true. So one of my big hobbies is going to music festivals. It's a big part of my life, and I would dress up when I go to music festivals.
Cool.
Uh, and it's a pretty intense like costume. It's like basically an African Zulu warrior. I have like a spear and a grass skirt and everything.
Oh wow. All right.
And
You can get the
one
spear
of the
through like
things
security? Is that how's that work?
yeah, they just it's not a real spear, so they just think it's dope. The first time I had to go through security with it, I was like, they're gonna make me throw it away and I'm just gonna be this dude with face paint and a grass skirt. But they're like, no, this is dope. And they saw it's clearly plastic.
Mm-hmm.
So they
All
let
right.
me through with it.
That's good.
Yeah. So I've been doing that for a few years, and I actually went to Burning Man for the first time last year.
Huh.
And at Burning Man, I did my whole get up. It's not a music festival, but it has similar elements.
Hmm.
And I was at a party, and someone asked me, "Hey, what's the whole outfit about, etc." And I was telling them, sort of, it's a reminder for me to myself almost to sort of be present and in my body instead of in my head, because I'm a person who can get very in his head, and just sort of be in touch with my primal self. And someone's like, "Hey, I have your Burning Man name," and I was like, "What's that?" And they said, "It's Primal." I was like, "Oh, I actually really like that."
Cool.
So yeah, when I decided to go on this journey of trying to become a pro, I actually changed my ID from Feargorm, which is the name I had been using for years, to I wanted it to just be Primal, but it's impossible to find that on any platform.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure.
that's
Yeah.
Primal. Yeah, so that's why I did the face pin and everything too.
All right, that's awesome. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it took me a moment too because I remembered you as Feargorm from back in the day. I was like, wait a second, that's Feargorm, isn't it? But now it's
yeah,
Primal. That's awesome. That's a really
yeah.
cool story. I love hearing people's stories behind their ID. So that's great. Cool. All
For
right. Well,
sure.
are you ready to get into the games?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, let's go. Okay, so here we are in the game, and we're trying something a little bit different today. Usually it's me playing, and the pro player is kind of guiding me, and I'm asking questions about what they would do, but we're switching it up. you have sent me a couple of VODs of recent games that you've played, and we're just going to kind of talk about that. We can pause this way, just kind of get a more thorough discussion ideally. So it's a Nicoverse, obviously. You've picked up a Caitlyn 2, you've got Chrono Battlecast going, early Ezreal. But aside from that, kind of set the stage for us, if you will, with this particular game.
Yeah, so I think being at 2-2 and having an Ezreal and a Cass is already a really good start, but also having an Ionic Spark on Alawi is kind of insane.
Yeah.
Because that gives me Battle Cass, which works in synergy with Ionic. So the way Battle Cass works is every time you apply damage or you take damage, you stack up the Battle Cass trait.
Mm-hmm.
So Ionic works super well with it because as Ionic is stacking from enemies casting spells, you're proccing Battle Cass.
That's a really good point right off the bat. And I haven't actually heard of anyone intentionally use Ionic Spark like that before. So that's really smart.
That's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite early game items, because Battle Cass is easy to get, right? Like I have a Cassiopeia here, but it could have easily been a Nocturne or a Kog'Maw.
Yeah.
And it makes for a really, like it's almost both extra damage and extra tankiness, right? Because if Alawi's above 50%, she's dealing damage more. If she's below 50%, she's healing more.
So I have to ask, what do you think about Alawi as a champion? And I know she just recently got a little bit more durability buffs. I like the idea of it, but I felt like I was never really seeing the stacking defensive stats really making a big difference in my games. What do you think?
I think she's really good now. She, the way she works makes it a little bit invisible what she's actually doing. Because she's reducing resistances and then adding to her own. Right. But I think particularly with the Battle Cast trait, she ends up being quite tanky. And what I like about her ult is that it's almost like a mini Ahri ult in that it can hit units that are far away. So often you'll see her DPS down the backline, the enemy team backline. So I think she's quite good. And I think if you can get, like a Nocturne, Malphite, Alawi opening, that's usually going to be pretty solid. It gives you a good balance of offensive and defensive traits and power.
So do you find yourself leaning towards Battlecast a lot? Like what synergies would you possibly choose Battlecast over right now in the early game?
That's a good question. So I would probably pick it over Infiltrator. It depends on the item though.
Sure.
So generally Battlecast I think by itself is just okay. If I have red buff though and I have a Kog'Maw, I always want Battlecast pretty much over anything. And if I have Ionic, I usually want Battlecast as well.
Okay.
Reason being what I mentioned before about stacking Battlecast procs with Ionic Spark, Morello's, and red buff. All of those items do that. So if I had like a Morello's on this cast, for example, you'd see her really, really pop off.
Yeah.
Because then she even becomes difficult to kill in her own right because she'll be getting a lot of healing off of Battlecast.
That's really interesting.
So yeah, I would say Battlecast is something I play around when I have items for it. If I don't have items, I'd probably rather play something like Chrono or Infiltrator or Vanguard, etc.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I suppose we should actually backtrack a little bit too and say, what is your generic, broad strokes, basic approach to the Nicoverse?
Yeah, so I'd first say that Nicoverse is one of my least favorite galaxies. Because I think it really creates even more variance when someone high rolls because they can immediately 2-star whatever they high rolled. But my strategy is usually try to level aggressively in Nicoverse to increase the chance that I high roll like an early Jinx or something like that.
Yeah, you have been doing that. We're just getting into almost Terror Bursters now, and you're already into 5 pretty deep.
Yeah, so I went 5 both because I was win streaking here. And because in Nicoverse, I think you're very rewarded if you manage to roll a 4 cost that you have items for early. So generally on Nicoverse, if it's early in stage 3 or somehow, which is a crazy high roll, getting a 4 cost in stage 2.
Yeah.
What I'll do is I will Nico that immediately. So if I got like a Jinx right now, I would Nico that immediately. Otherwise, if we're later in stage 3, early stage 4, what I'll try to do is go 8 at 4-3.
Okay.
And then double Nico a 5 cost instead. That's my general rule. The reason being, if I double Nico a Jinx right now, I can win streak through all of stage 3 and accrue a huge gold lead, which I can then convert into finding whatever 5 costs I need later. But if I get like a Jinx at 3-6 or something like that, or 4-1, I'm about to roll down at 8 anyway and look for upgraded units. So I might hit a Jinx just through spending my gold. And alternatively, I can find something even more powerful, like an Aurelion Soul or an Echo, and 2-star that instantly.
I suppose that's one of the changes with 3.5 now is that in general, and let me know how you feel about this too, but I feel that the 5 costs feel more now like they did towards the end of set 2, where you're not even as much concerned about the synergies that come along with the 5 costs, but just how individually strong they are.
Yeah, totally agree. You'll see people running Echo with pretty much anything right now because
Yeah.
he's just so strong if you can 2-star him. Same goes for Acel. I think people are starting to realize that Acel, his mana drain is actually
Oh, it's so
really
crazy good.
potent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think it's kind of hard to notice if you're not paying attention, but you can think of it almost like a team-wide mana reave, which is
Hmm.
nuts, right? It's like it's like Ezreal, but it's basically team-wide.
Yeah.
So you'll see people throw an Acel with random mech Sorc, or throw an Echo with a Fizz in infiltrate. Sorry, in Rebels late game or something like that. But yeah, overall, I think the 5 costs are much more potent than they were earlier in the set, and I like to play around getting 5 costs if I can in Nicoverse.
Okay. So a question that I've got right now, and maybe one a lot of people would be asking too, is you've got a Cassiopeia, and you haven't committed, of course, to Vanguard Mystics. You're very far from that, and if anything, you're closer to like Vanguard Brawler right now. But is there a world where you would slam the Morellos, or what are you waiting for? Because we know Morellos is so good with Cassiopeia. So what's stopping you from slamming that item right now?
Yeah, exactly. So the reason I'm not slamming this is because I think Riven Sorc is one of the strongest builds right now,
Oh,
and
okay.
I have really good items for Riven Sorc. Once you have the GA Ionic, that's core for Riven Sorc.
Yeah. So you want the
The
death
core
cap then?
exactly. I'm holding out for a death cap ideally, and also for Cass. Even though I have a Morellos, I also need 2 tiers. And
True.
ideally, I also get 2 bows so I can make rapid fire cannon. And I'm really far from those items. So right now, if I look at this game, I'm thinking, okay, first priority is Riven Sorc. And if I get a Riven, I'll just 2-star her.
Hmm.
But if I'm struggling to find a Riven, my backup plan is Vanguard Mystic.
Okay. It's funny because I feel like we just had this is like mini conversation in our Discord group just like a day or two ago where I was saying too that I felt like uh, Vanguard Mystic and Vanguard Sorc transitioning into Riven into GP maybe eventually are 2 comps that like flow into each other very well. And especially now that you can sell stuff back for almost full gold, you can pivot between the two a lot more fluidly. Would you agree those comps kind of intersect really nicely right now?
Yeah, because these items, even though the GA and the Ionic Spark are not core on Cassiopeia,
Hmm.
they're really good on Jace.
Yeah.
I think the nerf to Vanguard Mystic made it more important to get Jace items than it used to be to take a first place. So I could definitely go into Jace, and it's not a big deal to get the Vanguards. Vanguards are usually pretty easy to get, even though I have Brawlers right now.
Right.
So yeah, I think the general family of magic damage users is easy to pivot in between.
That makes sense. And we saw you kind of hovering the vest over Alawi for a moment just in case you needed that little extra HP. And I think that's something a lot of newer players, don't think about is that you can use those item components sometimes on a champion you know you're probably going to sell to just, eke out a win, keep a win streak going, or keep yourself from losing HP.
Exactly. So I didn't want to commit it unless I had to
Oh,
because I
Timo
might
with a
want to make a
tier.
Morellos.
Jeez. All right.
Yeah,
Sorry,
but
I
yeah,
was
those
just
2 tiers. So sad that those went. I'm not sure. Do I get a tier here at all?
looks
Okay, it
like
looks
you
like I
have
do
the
get a
option
tier.
to. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny
yeah.
how far down I feel like Aurelia has dropped in terms of priority. Like an Aurelia free on a Nicoverse on that carousel, like a patch or two ago, like pre 3.5. I feel like people have been scrambling to it. Oh, you found the Riven
Yeah.
too. Wow.
Found the Riven. Yeah. So here's a mistake that I made in hindsight immediately. So you can
Hmm.
see I'm on a 3-round streak right now, and I found the Riven.
Yeah.
I remember this game. I should have gone level 7 immediately, and tried to continue the
Uh,
win streak.
okay. Yeah.
Um, because I hit a huge power spike and I had the chance to get a 5-round streak going into the next creep round. So
Yeah.
this was totally a mistake.
So would you say, and I feel like this is one of the most common mistakes I make too, is that when I hit what I'm excited about for what I see as my final comp, I transition earlier than you should and kind of like ditch a win streak. Do you feel like that's a common problem a lot of players have, even as they're trying to kind of like, even better players, you know?
Absolutely. It's a mistake I make and I try to work on. And it's a mistake I see a lot of less experienced players make, because the thing is, like, usually the comp that you want to end in is different than the comp that you're playing up to that point.
Yeah.
And the comp that you're playing up to that point is going to have a bunch of like 2-star units who don't fit in the end comp. So a lot of the nuance and skill of the game is understanding how to transition without having a huge dip in power while you're moving from one comp to the other.
And I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I would say one of the struggles, one of the challenges with making this transition that you made right now is that the Riven 2 is very strong, but she seems to be a little bit reliant on the damage from the 4 Sorcerer and then 6 Sorcerer buffs to really carry like she carries in this comp.
Exactly. I find that before she gets 4 Sorc online, she's just okay.
Right.
I think that's once you hit 4 Sorcs, she's really, really potent. I mean, here obviously she's, you know, she is winning, and it's a 6 versus 7.
She's still strong,
but it's still strong. But she doesn't get to that sort of like one shot, this feels unfair territory until you get the 4 Sorcs in.
Interesting. I suppose finding the Wukong here kind of throws a little bit of a wrench into your plans too, because Wukong is so good. Like, you want to find a way to work that into the comp somehow. I guess you can throw him in at level 7 here, like you did. But yeah, that's always one of the things that I struggle with. Maybe you can speak to this a bit, where you commit to a strong 4-cost unit, but then you find other ones that are also strong. What do you do with that? Do you usually just try to find ways to stick them in there temporarily, or do you ignore them? Like, what's your general thought process on that?
Yeah, there's certain units like Wukong, Gnar, Fizz who can sort of fit into a lot of comps. Just as an individual unit, they're strong. Whereas like a random Jinx, you're not really going to throw in and get many results from her.
Yeah.
So it depends on the 4-cost. But generally speaking, like, for instance, in this comp, you can almost think of completed comps as having flex space, right? So if we look at Sorc Riven spikes at 7, right? Because you have 6 Sorcs and Riven. And then at 8, you can fit one sort of non-Sorc, non-Riven unit. So when I look at this, I'm like, okay, well, I have a Wukong. I can actually play this for the foreseeable future if I get him 2-starred, because I have extra space with that. It wouldn't be taking away from my comp at 8. So yeah, so he's a unit I would keep. Fizz is another unit I would keep. Fizz is very popular to throw into comps right now.
Yeah, Fizz
because
is
as an
strong all
infiltrator,
around.
yeah, exactly. He's just so threatening to the backline and so disruptive that he might be the best 4-cost pound for pound right now. Comp agnostic 4-cost.
Okay. So you slammed the chalice. It seems like the items aren't quite falling in a way that you would prefer at this point. You did find the victor though. What do you think about the chalice overall in terms of strength, in terms of its place in Sorc comps?
I think it's quite good in Sorc comp actually, because with Sorcs you naturally want to backline your units and keep them all in a row anyway. So you're generally going to be getting like 90 AP. Distributed across your team, which is like a lot when you think of it that way.
Oh yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of AP. So I like it. It makes positioning a little bit awkward sometimes. And I think with like Locket, Zeke's, this item, it's easy to bait yourself into bad positioning because you want to get maximum value. So you just have to be careful. Because for example, let's say you put it on a unit who you want to put in the corner as bait, then you can't put people on 2 sides of them, right? Right. But overall, I think Chalice is good in this comp, but outside of this comp, I don't really build it.
So right now you're 3rd in the lobby with 67. There's a bit of a difference between there's a bit of an HP difference obviously between 1 and 2, and then your spot in 3rd. So it's becoming a little bit of a lopsided lobby. Like, in situations like this, do you worry that much about the 2 players that are win streaking that have seemingly just kind of high rolled this game? Or when you're scouting, do you worry more about the players below you that you think you have a better chance of beating? Like, how do you approach a situation where you've got like one or two clearly very strong players in the lobby? Like, do you worry about them that much?
I generally ignore like who's in first versus who's low. I'm more pay attention to who do I think I'm gonna be fighting soon.
Okay.
And of the people who I'm gonna be fighting soon, whose comp looks like the biggest threat to me, right? Because someone might be in first, but they might be holding a ton of gold, so they actually are not at their power spike, and they actually might be weaker than someone who's like in sixth place who just rolled all of their gold down, right? So that's why it's really important to constantly be scouting and sort of deducing who you're likely to face next, right? Because you're not going to face the 4 people you've previously faced.
Yeah.
So that narrows it down to 3, assuming the lobby is full still. And B, you want to be looking for people who have spiked in a huge way and are big threats to you, or just have comps that counter yours, right? So a comp that might be difficult for me is maybe Vanguard Mystic. At this point. So I'll be looking for like, okay, are there any people running 4 Mystic in this lobby? Or is there anyone running a Zephyr, right? Because if my Riven gets Zephyr'd, that's a hard counter. And I'll lose the fight like, 6 units to none. So that's what I'm more paying attention to rather than like how much health does the person above me have relative to me.
That makes sense. You found the death cap, so those are arguably perfect items on Riven right now. I would say they are, wouldn't you?
I would agree.
Yeah. Okay. You're holding on to the Fizz a little bit. That's another champion, honestly, that we talked about just being good, but I think he also benefits a lot from the Sorcerer buff. Going back to, like previous patches, the reason Gangplank Sorcerers work so well, and why Nico works so well, honestly, in Star Guardians, is that Sorcerers really capitalize on frontliners that can do big AoE ultimates with or without crowd control. And so it kind of seems like that's the general focus with anything Sorc related, is find a frontliner that's going to do a lot of damage to a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is sort of like, I guess the closest analog is the Star Guardians from before Chalice was removed, right? When you would run Nico frontline with a GA Ionic and then, just whatever else you could find for her, like Zrot Portal or whatever.
Right.
But this is a little bit different because, the good old days, right? But this is a little different because you have less CC, because Riven's not a CC unit.
Right.
So it's more just concentrated in Riven hard carrying 1v9ing, So in that sense, it's more important for you to worry about her positioning over anything else, and making sure she's dodging Shroud, she's dodging Zephyr. If you don't have a QSS, she can be susceptible to CC. That's why the comp is sort of one of those comps where it deals a lot of damage to people. You can just completely blow them out, or you get completely blown out if you have a positioning error.
Yeah. So some people might remember you in the TFT community. One of the earliest things that kind of, I would say, put you on the radar of a lot of fans out there is your Star Guardians guide from way back then. And I personally used that guide and got addicted to Star Guardians and have loved, Star Guardian Sorc builds ever since then. But since then as well, Star Guardians have kind of fallen off a bit. So I, as one of the original, I would say, proponents of Star Guardian Sorcerers, that style of playing, where would you rate the current status of Star Guardians in the meta?
Almost unplayable tier, unfortunately. It's super sad because at first it was a really, really fun comp. It was one of my favorite comps to play, and then it had a period where it was really oppressive and kind of broken. And then there are 2 things that they changed, right? One, they nerfed Syndra, so she did less damage, so she's just less of a viable carry.
Like multiple times nerfed her. Yeah.
Okay, I'm pausing here because the replay froze.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's very pixelated for me, but it might not be on your side.
Oh, yeah, it's not on my side because I'm playing it locally. I noticed your voice kind of... let me pause it for a second. I can just edit this part out real quick. Okay. I noticed your voice kind of got a little bit robotic, too.
Okay, maybe it's just my internet. If that's the case, if it's okay for you, that this is fine. Otherwise, I can try...
you can try just turning off your webcam, too, if that would help.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll try that.
Because we have this problem all the time on Giant Slayer, where like the Discord call gets kind of pixelated. So yeah, that happens all the time.
Okay. Okay, I just turned off my video. Mind if I get water real quick?
No, no, go ahead. That's fine.
Cool. BRB. Okay, I'm back.
All right, awesome. Okay, let's see. So I'll just. Can you see the game still? If I go like this?
Yeah, it's pixelated, but it's
Shoot.
fine.
All right. All right. I'll try to be descriptive, I guess. If it gets too bad to watch, just let me know.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons why I've just been like playing the games myself, you know, just so we can like ensure quality. Although they would have to watch the Discord as well. But anyway, we'll just keep going. It's fine.
Yeah, and what I'll do is if it gets like unwatchable, I'll just be silent so you have room to edit.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
but now this is fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I will press play again, and we'll get going. So. All right. Okay, so you're fighting a couple more fizzes, and Victor, of course. We were talking a little bit about Star Guardians. Ooh, there's an Echo too. Nice. Echo 2 is an Echo also, TOO. That gets confusing when you talk TFT. But what do you think about Syndra now that she's gotten her little buff where the orbs will continue on? Just continuing to have that conversation about the Star Guardian Sorc state of things.
Yeah, I think she's just sort of a supporting unit now. I mean, not only did Syndra get hit in a patch, they removed the ability to stack Seraph's Embrace, or blue buff, as we now call it. So I think that sort of killed the ability for Star Guardians to carry hard. And they're more just supporting units, or units who are really good if you can get a spatula and make a non-Star Guardian into a Star Guardian. Right, so like Star Guardian Victor can be really, really strong if you can get him online, and then you put in like a Janna and Syndra, and even 6-star Guardian, even when you have a spat, is generally not going to be that appealing. So usually it's you splash in 3-star Guardian, but it's not the focus, and it's just a nice to have. Yeah. And then Janna's a good unit overall, so she's nice to have as well.
I really like this adaptation you have with the Fizz 2 and the Infiltrator Zoe, because her CZ coming faster is a big deal, and also just, you know, Fizz being able to ult and take advantage of the Sorcerer buff. Do you find yourself putting Fizz into these comps fairly often, or is this just a thing for this game, more or less?
Yeah, I find myself throwing Fizz into a lot of just comps in general, even non-Sorc comps. I think he's particularly good in Sorc comps because he's benefiting from 6 Sorcerer as well. Right, so he's doing huge amounts of damage to the backline.
Yeah.
Looking at this, I'm actually positioning incorrectly here because I should have my Victor providing Chalice to Fizz as well. Right. One small thing that I don't know why more players don't really pay attention to, it's kind of minor, but minor things turn into major results in TFT.
Yeah.
Is that if you put your infiltrators on the front line, they land in the back line faster, meaning they can get their ult off a little bit faster. So my instinct is usually put them on the front line, actually. But here I should have had him backline next to Victor to get AP there.
That makes sense.
And I didn't. So that's a mistake there for sure.
So here you were trying to avoid a frontline Zephyr that I assume you'd scouted from a different lobby. I didn't catch it, but putting Andy in the front kind of seems to suggest that to me. You're playing against Mech right now, and Mech Sorcerer has been very popular. It seems like the strongest version of Mech right now. Let me get your opinions on just like the Mech trait in general. Where do you think it kind of stands in the tier list, as it were, I guess?
Definitely strong. And it pains me to say that because I'm so tired of playing against Mech personally. I'm a person who really disliked Mech Infiltrator. So I think it's good for the game, but I just personally dislike it. I think Mech is really good. One interesting variation of Mech that I've been seeing is 2 Demolitionist, 2 Sorcerer, 2 Battlecast, 2 Mystic.
Yeah, the Kruor kind of version that he played the other week in Giant Slayer.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'm not really sure what the power level of that is, and I haven't seen people run it much in NA. but I think it's a little bit more popular maybe in other regions, and I've seen it on streams occasionally. You can run mech with GP. Mech GP is super good because then you get demolitionist, and you get you can fit 6 Sorcs I think at 9. But before that, usually just running 4 Sorc.
Right.
That can be really potent. Basically, with the changes to mech is good even when the units in the mech are low level. It's less reliant on getting like 2-star Annie, Fizz, and Rumble. So I've seen people just splash in mech when they hit a level 1 Fizz, Annie, Rumble just because it's good.
Yeah.
Right? The mech itself does a lot of damage and creates a huge like built-in front line for you. So I think mech is very strong right now.
That makes sense. I can't believe this person got that Force of Nature off the carousel, by the way. That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's
telling me, man.
Whenever that shows up, I'm like, oh no, please.
Yeah, for sure.
So now, we've made it to the top 5 so far in this particular game. It's fairly tight between 3rd and 5th at the moment. So when you scout, when you position with this comp, right now, what are you kind of looking for primarily?
So I'm looking for Zephyr, number 1, and Blitzcrank. So you want to make sure your units generally are not in the absolute corner, so that Blitzcrank doesn't pull them. You want to avoid Zephyrs on the Riven, most important, and then probably the Fizz, second most important, because my Victor's only level 1 right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking for stuff like Gnar, making sure that my carry is on the opposite side of Gnar, so Gnar's less likely to be able to pull them in. And trying to predict who I'm going to be facing based on who I've recently faced. So here, ooh, this is super close.
Yeah, no kidding.
Boom. Wow. Okay, I won that one. That's
all awesome. Right. I thought you were in trouble there. I was prepping a question that was like, so what do you think went wrong in that round? But you won it. So what do you think went right in that round?
I would have to go back and look at it. Honestly, it was probably sure. Let's do that.
Let's do it one more time.
It's probably my Fizz getting onto the back line.
Let's see. I think this is the round right here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. Yeah. Let's see.
So let's actually go ahead a little bit. This is our first time doing this. I'm afraid to advance it because I don't want to mess it up. I'm gonna try it here.
Sure.
Actually, I'm not. I'm gonna let it time out. So, okay.
Cool.
So you've scouted a little bit. You feel like you had a pretty good idea of who you're gonna play with this one. All right.
Yeah. So
we'll pause it right when everything comes out, so we can kind of like set the stage. So you're playing against almost kind of your mirror comp. Wow, he's got a 2-star Janna too.
Yeah. So this is I'm actually surprised I won this one. This guy looks really, really strong relative to me, and he got a shroud on me.
I was gonna say,
maybe his shroud missed the Fizz.
Let's see.
It looked, because I think it's 2 hexes wide. Yeah, so it missed the Fizz, and my Fizz got into the back line and was able to hit. Yeah, huge fizzle right there. That was the primary reason that I won. And in addition to killing a lot of stuff, it slowed down the Victor from getting his ult off. Right. So I think those were the big things, but I think I could have played that fight a little bit better because I didn't have my Fizz next to the Victor. So Victor wasn't benefiting from the Zeeks that spawned on Ziggs. On Fizz.
Right.
And Fizz wasn't benefiting from the Chalice that spawned on Victor.
Right.
But yeah, that guy was really strong, right? 2-star Janna. Shroud is a hard counter to me. So that's someone I wouldn't expect to beat multiple times.
So unfortunate item with the runins. That happens sometimes. Who do you generally throw the runins on now? Because Lux used to be the AD item carrier for me back before the patch, before she was removed. Who gets all the AD items you don't want now? What? Free Force of Nature? What?
Yeah, so I think the Free Force of Nature makes up for the Runons.
I guess so. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. We're okay with Kane now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a high roll getting the Force of Nature. Jeez. I would say in this situation, because my Fizz has full slots, I would probably put it on like, depending on how long I think I'm gonna live. If I think I'm gonna live till the next carousel, then I probably just throw it on like a Syndra or something. So she's most valuable unit after a Victor.
Sure.
But I also hit Echo here, and Echo's ult is really potent. So I think I probably put it on Echo.
Yeah, a little extra attack speed helps, I'm sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to get his ult off a little bit faster, because you have the bow as part of the Runons.
Yeah. So there's an Aurelion Soul on the other side here, and it's a pretty big Gnar ultimate. And that looks like, oh, but the Riven.
Real close.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, that 6 Sorc Riven damage is crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And just the shield that she gets because of the death cap, too, is just absolutely nutty.
Exactly.
Wow. All right. Yeah, it's kind of a wonky comp, too. It took you a long time to find that Victor, too, by the way.
It did. It did. Yeah, it's funny. Like when I look at this setup, I look at these items, I'm like, wow, this should actually maybe be even a first.
Sure.
Now that I hit Victor 2. But in Nicoverse, it's much harder to take a first with this comp because other people are looking at like ASOL 2. This guy has a Mastery 3.
Yeah.
So your end game it's harder to. Nicoverse just makes the requirement for taking a first much higher. Per my comments about trying to use my Nikos on a 5 cost if it's late enough in stage 3 or 4. So in hindsight, I actually don't know if making the Riven 2 actually hurt me and hard capped me at a top 3 or 4 at best,
Okay.
Because other people, like if someone gets like an ASOL 2, they're pretty much automatically stronger than me. So, yeah.
I suppose there's that, but then there's also the argument that if you hadn't 2-starred the Riven, you wouldn't have been in a position to even, maybe take a top 4 because of how long it ended up taking you to find that Victor 2.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think basically to decide what the right move would have been, you'd have to sort of think about how strong was I at the point where I found the Riven, and did I need the Riven or to Nico her, or could I have waited a few rounds, then rolled down, maybe hit a Riven 2 through gold, and then look for a 5 cost, like a 2-star Echo or something.
So here's that opponent that was strong before, and this time it did hit the Fizz, and the Fizz did get the ult off. Oh wow, I didn't think he would. It's a little bit too late though.
Yeah. And there he also got a really good shroud on me. But this guy he just ended up being stronger because he had 2 Rivens. Both of them had Guardian Angel. He had a 2-star Janna. He had a 2-star Xerath, and he landed a shroud. And I think he had a Star Guardian Victor too. So I don't know who won this lobby, but I wouldn't be surprised if he top 2'd, if not first, took a first there.
All right, we're back. And so it was a 4th with that particular game. Again, like on the show, obviously, we're not super concerned about like results in the game. It's more about just like exploring your thought process as you go through a game and all that. Now, do you find yourself playing Riven 6 Sorc pretty often in the current meta?
I try to. Actually, probably my favorite item start right now is Rod. Just because often, I'll find that there's only 1 Rod, maybe 2 on the opening carousel. So by me taking a Rod, it makes it harder for other people to contest my comp.
Makes sense.
Because you really, really need Rods. Ideally 3 of them for Riven Sorc. And B, if I get Ionic, it's so easy to win streak, and Ionic is really flexible as well. So I like Rod. I'm not saying it's the best. I think just given my comp preferences, I like Rod a lot, and I like running Riven Sorc a lot.
Rod makes sense too, because if you end up running Vanguard Mystic, that can become the Morellonomicon for the Cassiopeia as well. So yeah,
exactly.
Or an Ionic Spark for the Jace. So makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
All right. Ready to go into game number 2?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's do it. All right, so here we are in game number 2, and it's a normal galaxy. Wow, who knew?
Thank God.
Crazy, and it's an all-offensive item carousel. Interesting. So, based on this, you would normally go for the Rod pretty early, right? And it looks like in this particular case, you're just kind of chilling out to see what happens. You got a Rod anyway, so it's all good.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure what happened is my dog was acting up, so I have to take care of that real quick.
That'll do it. That's legit.
Yeah, but I got a Rod, which I'm fine with. I don't really love J4, but usually I end up selling the starting unit anyway, so not a big deal.
That makes sense. So let's talk about Jarvan for a second. He's, because Shredder is kind of done. It seems like he's kind of done because he doesn't really hold his own in the Protector comps that exist right now. And with Shredder kind of being out at the moment until people kind of figure out maybe a way to rework it, Jarvan is kind of down at the bottom of useful champions right now in the game, it seems like.
Yeah, like he was already not a great champion to play. He would only really be good in the context of Shredder. So now it's like 95% of the time I end up selling him. It's only when I'm forced to run a Protector opening, like if I get a bunch of Zins or Rakans or something, that I'll end up running him. But he's usually someone who I won't even try to 2-star unless I have to 2-star him because I have nothing else.
Yeah, it always feels bad when like your only 2-star in the early game is a Jarvan, and you're like, well, all right, this is more like a 1.25 or a 1.5 star really in terms of
Yeah,
effectiveness. Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't really offer much tankiness, right?
Yeah.
So because his ult is just an attack speed ult, so I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah. He's in that weird spot where you think he was kind of designed to be tanky, but he's not. But then he also doesn't really do a lot of damage, even when he speed boosts himself. So it's an odd champ for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he is really tanky and protector, so I'll give him that. But
True.
outside of protector, the gap between his strength as a protector and non-protector is massive.
So I'm looking at this store right now, and I'd be buying those Zoes in a heartbeat. Okay, so you did too. Was there ever any other sort of secondary choice over the Zoes in this case?
Yeah, so Zoe's actually another unit who I'm not a huge fan of, because I don't think she's very versatile. Like I think she's sort of someone you only play if you're opening with Sorcs.
Right.
So I would have at this point I'm actually concerned about getting a front line, right? But there was only one Leona and one Alawi, so selling
Okay.
a pair of Zoe's didn't feel good. Fortunately, I was able to just sell a Yi and then pick up the Alawi and the Leona. And at this point, I'm just trying to assemble some semblance of a front line,
Right.
for my back line to be able to stand behind.
I really like any sort of tanky frontline in 2 Sorc right now. What do you think about openings that involve 2 Sorc? They seem like some of the strongest in the game at the moment.
Yeah, I think the thing I like about it, and I agree, it's really good, is that you don't have an issue with Vanguards, right? Because Vanguards just hard counter any physical front backline right now in the early game. And B, if one of those Sorcs is Ari is just one of the best 2-cost period because she does so much damage and a lot of it is true damage. So I'm a huge fan of running Ari. So if I have a Zoe, I'll be happy if I have an Ari, and then I'll look to run the Zoe too.
Yeah, I feel like the Ari is kind of the key to unlocking a lot of times a win streak with sorcerers early. Depending on the front line. Obviously, in your particular case in this game, a Jarvan 1 is not going to do it. But
sure.
but there, if you have a more of a standard front line like the 2 Vanguards or something like that, that works out. Easy choice, I would say, here to replace your 1-star sorcerers with your 2-star other units. You got the Battlecast trait. And you've got the Ionic Spark. So are you prioritizing saving the Jarvan and not selling him because of the pair? Or do you feel like maybe you should have sold the Jarvan and moved those items onto the Alawi for the battle cast?
Yep, I think you're right. This was a mistake, and I totally should have gone for Alawi because,
Okay.
again, even a 2-star J4 is just not going to be doing that much. I would rather hold out hope for the Alawi, and it definitely would have made me stronger for this particular round. It looks like I end up winning it regardless, but Alawi would have been the better play.
I suppose there's something to be said too for, if you take a loss in that very first PvP round of, losing out through carousel, or at least trying to lose out in a safe way, as in where you kill a couple of their units, you don't lose that hard. What's your philosophy kind of like on your reaction to winning the first round or losing the first round, as far as trying to go for a win streak or a loss streak in round 2?
So if I lose the first round, I don't consider that as having too much bearing on whether I should go for loss streak or win streak.
Okay.
Generally 2-3 is when I make a decision about whether I'm giving up on win streaking or not. Because even if I can get like a 3 or 4 round streak, I think that's still decent. And I'm a player who generally prioritizes keeping his health high. I think it's really difficult. Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, no worries.
I think it's really difficult to play from a position of low HP, particularly with the changes to win streaking that they made several patches ago, or sorry, lose streaking.
Yeah.
Where you don't get nearly as much gold for lose streaking anymore. And the problem with intentionally lose streaking is if you lose too hard, the amount of gold that you get is not going to be worth the amount of health that you lose.
Yeah.
So I generally try to play strongest board most of the time. But if I can control a lose streak and end up around 80 HP, I'll be okay with losing.
So how does Aegon do it? Man, it's crazy, right? That guy
Yeah,
gives me a heart attack.
Yeah, some players are super good at controlling lose streaks. I am not. So that's A, area I have to work on, and B, just something that I've chosen to play around by modifying my style. You'll see players like Pull. I was watching him earlier.
Yeah.
I've noticed he pretty much always seems to try to play strongest board stage 2, even if he's losing. He'll pre-level even off of a loss and stuff like that. So I guess different players have different approaches to the game, because part of the appeal of pre-leveling is that it's a little bit of a gamble, but you can roll a 4 cost.
True.
Who can then carry you from that point out of that deficit.
What's your feelings on that? Like, what do you feel is the best way to approach the game right now? "Quote unquote" best, because it's always kind of changing. But right now, do you think prioritizing HP is the most important thing? Do you think it's trying to be adaptable and lose streak when you should "quote unquote" lose streak, or lose streak when you should win streak? What do you think is the best way to approach TFT in general right now?
Yeah, so take it all with a massive grain of salt, but I generally think playing your strongest board and conserving HP is the best. Particularly a high elo where the games come down to very small HP margins.
Makes sense.
And I can't tell you how many games where it's like I would have been 4th instead of 5th if I had 5 more HP, or even 2 more HP sometimes. And again, lose streaking is not that rewarding anymore. So I generally find that I want to play strongest board. In addition, I think the meta is very aggressive right now. So if I'm trying to lose streak, oftentimes I'll find that there are other people playing really, really aggressively. So I'll take huge losses out of nowhere, like a 10 HP hit, because people are level 5 at 2-3 or 2-4. That
makes sense. Yeah. So let's talk about this game in particular here. 78 HP, so bottom of the lobby at the moment. You've been taking a lot of damage here, but you have 4 2 costs. And I think people might look at that and be like, well, that should be a really strong board. But there don't really seem to be a lot of synergies besides Chrono kind of going on here. And again, the front line is a little bit on the weak side. So as far as this game goes, I feel like if I were playing this game, I'd be a little bit frustrated about this position. And I'd be wondering, do I just go for like 2 Vanguards, even though I give up a couple 2 stars? Like, what are you thinking right now in this game?
Yeah, so I think before the point where I hit the TF, this actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier about should I be playing the Jarvan for a 2-star or play the Alawi? Right. I think I should have just played the Alawi, because at least if I play the Alawi, I have a chance to make her a pseudo 2 cost by getting Brawler with a Malphite or something. Whereas a Jarvan, unless I tech in protectors, which are just kind of hard to run sometimes, and don't really lead me anywhere, I'm always going to be kind of kneecapped. So I think it just goes back to earlier. I should have probably played Alawi, and then she's benefiting from Battlecast, so she gets a little bit tankier even.
That makes sense.
With Ionic. And then with GA Ionic, she becomes really, really good as a frontline unit.
Okay. So you found the Jace, which is always a really nice unit to hit if you're thinking about going Vanguard, Sorcerer, or something like that. Him and Wukong sort of seem to be the default tanks of choice before you find that Riven. So are you feeling now it's time to kind of remove the 2 stars?
Certainly the J4. Nocturne he's a little tricky. I think Nocturne is actually really good if positioned correctly.
Okay.
Just because there'll be so many fights where if someone isn't protecting their backline, Nocturne can kill 2 backline units no problem at 2-star, and disable them and prevent them from even getting an ult off. So I wouldn't want to drop the Nocturne unless I absolutely have to. But the J4 absolutely would want to drop him and get those items even on a Jace. And it looks like when I hit the cast and I got a tier, I probably decide, okay, there's a chance of running Vanguard Mystic at this point. And these are perfect items for Jace if I want to run Vanguard Mystic.
So it's a pretty easy choice. I mean, like, this to me looks like a really strong board now, where you've got and however you end up arranging this backline, where you've got the 2 Vanguards, you've got the Cassiopeia with a tier, even though she's just Cassiopeia 1, and then you've got Battlecast, and you've got Caitlyn just ideally one-shotting at least one person during the fight.
Exactly. Yeah, this is miles stronger than my old board.
So why have you picked up the Darius?
So Darius is just like, he wasn't going to cost me econ, he's someone I wanted to hold just in case. I think probably I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe I put the Ionic GA on him because the 2-star Darius with these items is insane mid-game.
True.
But I ended up just selling him once I saw, okay, no, we have it on Jace. It's going to stay on Jace. There's no way I'm going to sell him. So I sold him to make econ here.
That makes sense. I was wondering if like maybe there was a scenario where you kind of like tech in Space Pirates to get a little bit more gold or something like that. But This makes sense. So now you have access to the 4 Vanguards here. Probably a little bit too early to move them in because it feels like you kind of need the damage that the Caitlyn and Nocturne kind of give you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 4 Vanguard can sometimes be a bait because it's kind of overkill on armor.
Right.
I think generally speaking, if someone doesn't have a Last Whisper, adding another 100 armor is you're gonna sharply diminishing returns because obviously you get a lot tankier, but you're losing damage units for that. So
Yeah.
usually I'm not running 4 Vanguard outside of the context of Vanguard Mystic.
So we just saw a round where you took a loss to another Vanguard Mystic player, actually, and his Cassiopeia has the blue buff. So that feels, whenever I'm kind of like, okay, I think I can maybe go this comp, and then I run into somebody almost immediately that has like a slightly better version of it. I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do now? So it looks like you're staying the course, but in your opinion, when you see a situation like that happening, when do you stick with it and when do you pivot?
Yeah, so the logic depends on the unit. So if it's a Cassiopeia, because Cassiopeia is a 3 cost, it's very easy for 2 people to run Vanguard Mystic, no problem, because there's 18 of them in the pool. Whereas with a 4 cost like a Jinx, if it's already 2 people running Jinx, basically out of the 3 players, one of them is going to have to take a hard bot 2. Just off not finding the Jinx. Yeah, I think there are still 12 Jinxes in the pool, but the chances of finding them go down a lot when 2 other people already have 2 stars. So when I see another Vanguard Mystic player, I'm not concerned at all. If I see 2 people are already ahead of me on, playing Jinx or, back in the, I guess if a Jhin comp were relevant right now, I don't think Jhin comps are super good right now, but same logic applies for that. Cybers, on the other hand, I think Cybers is a little bit weird because Cybers, you can run Vayne or you can run Aurelia. I'm not a fan of running Aurelia, but if you were a Cybers one trick, you could conceivably just try to force it every game and pivot between Vayne and Aurelia. And just recognize that if you're playing Aurelia, you're probably not taking a first off of Aurelia carry. Without perfect balance.
It's the first normal carousel of the game. We had an offensive one and then a defensive one. Now it's a normal one. And so you're able to find the tier to make the blue buff for the Cassiopeia. So is this the moment where you feel like you've hard committed to Vanguard Mystic now?
Yeah, I think once I go for multiple tiers, if I was planning on running Riven Sorcs, I would be looking for more rods.
Yeah.
But because I'm going for more tiers, it makes more sense to run cast, and it's also just more straightforward because I wouldn't have to sell off many units to make that pivot. Whereas right now, I have no Sorcs, right? I have just 1 Ahri on the bench.
Yeah.
So, and finding those Sorcs and 2-starring them is pretty important as well.
Ooh, wow. Cassiopeia 2, just like that. That's nice to see.
Yeah. And I think here, I decided to all in actually, right? Because I saw, okay, I'm kind of weak here and I can be strong if I manage to hit something here. Fortunately, it's the cast. But this is, I think it's really important to note here, when you realize that you're weak in stage 3, a really strong move to salvage what is looking like a bot 4 is going 7 and then all-inning at 7, rather than all-inning at 6, because your chances of hitting 3 and 4 costs goes up significantly, and you'll just have more units on the board than other people.
Right.
So that'll often be enough to get you through the remainder of stage 3, and then you can econ up back through a PvE round. So this game was actually looking like a potential bot 4 until I decided to all in here.
That round too just now was like traumatizing for me because it looked like your Cassiopeia was like grabbed and like totally dead, but that Soraka, I think finding the Soraka was able to kind of carry you through that round.
Yeah, both Soraka and Battlecast.
Yeah.
Shout out to Battlecast again because
good point, yeah.
Battlecast, it will help you heal even when your cast gets pulled, or one of the weaknesses of cast is her super short range if you don't have rapid fire cannon. And when you have Battlecast on her, even if she's in the range of like, a Jace ult or a Wukong ult, she'll often be healing passively, even when she's not actively attacking, because her ult is damage over time. So it's constantly building up Battlecast stacks, and she has it on multiple units. So I really, really like Battlecast pretty much all the way up through like early to mid stage 5. I think it's super good on Cassiopeia in particular.
That's really interesting. And they did just buff Battlecast as well. So I feel like at some point in the rest of this set, there's going to be a moment, there's going to be a patch where Battlecast becomes like a thing to go. We're not there yet, it seems like, but I would wager it's not going to take much to make that a thing.
For sure. And I think right now it's at the point where it's one of the strongest early mid game synergies and just something that falls off late.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where Riot wants it to be. I don't know if they want there to be like a Battlecast endgame comp. I've seen people try to run Battlecast endgame comps, and pretty much every time it's bot forward from what I've seen. But Battlecast is not far away from being super good.
Right.
Because if you make it strong late game, the early and mid game strength of it will make it one of the best comps in the game.
Well, you've got a really strong board now. All your tanks that matter are 2-star. You've got 2-star Nocturne, 2-star Cassiopeia. Wow, and you just found the Morel Namicon. So you've got to be feeling really good at this point about this game.
For sure. Yeah. Now I look at this, I'm like, okay, we were in bot 4 territory. Now we can actually play for first.
Yeah.
Obviously, the person in first is about 28 HP up on me. So, they do have a significant advantage. But based on my items, you can immediately tell, okay, we're playing for first right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if, like, let's say I didn't hit a Morello's there, and I'm middle of the pack, and let's say I had to find a rod, I might not be able to play for first. And the reason why it's important to make this judgment call is because it'll dictate when you roll, right? If I think I'm playing for first, then I save more gold and I try to econ harder and then roll down later so I can get end game units. If I feel like based on my items and my HP, I have to play for top 4, then I'll roll earlier. But based on the units and the items I got, this is a play for first situation.
Yeah, it feels like you can be a little bit quote unquote greedy with the economy and just kind of save up now. So I guess the next big question with that is, when do you decide to go for Mystic here? Because you'd be giving a Battlecast to do that. And I guess you can't really go for Mystic yet. You're missing like a Bard or a Lulu or something like that. But in most games when you're playing Vanguard Mystic, when do you usually say, all right, now I really should have like 4 and 4 online here?
I would say start of like 4-3 is usually the earliest that I'll put in for Mystic. Because that's 4-3 is when usually people will go level 8 and they'll all in. And they'll start hitting like 2-star 4 cost or 2-star 5 cost if they're lucky. So that's when the big magic damage starts coming out, and it becomes really, really important to have 4 Mystic online. Before that point, I think Battlecast is a little bit better, just because 4 Mystic, usually the units are not going to be very high impact units.
Yeah.
Usually it's like a Bard here adding who has like no combat effectiveness. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a 1-star Lulu, but it's usually going to be like maybe a 2-star Karma, 1-star Soraka, 2-star to 1-star Bard.
Yeah.
So those are units who are not going to be super high impact relative to what Battlecast can provide to me right now.
All right, that makes sense. So looking at this board right now, one other question I had, and I feel like I kind of know the answer, but I'll ask you anyway. One of the core items for Cassiopeia is oftentimes a rapid fire cannon. You have a bow, but you chose to put on a Nocturne instead early on when you did that. I would assume it's so you can kind of diversify the carries, quote unquote, that are doing damage in this comp right now. Is it for a different reason?
It's actually just because I don't want to put a bow on Cassiopeia without knowing that I can get another bow.
Sure.
Right? Because the absolute worst case scenario is that I have a bow stuck on her and then I can't make it into anything useful for her.
Very true.
Mid case is I make a Giant Slayer, which is okay on her. And then best case is rapid fire cannon. So I'd rather leave that slot open because maybe I have to put on another rod item. Like sometimes you end up with like, a Cassiopeia with blue buff, Morello's, and like a death cap, which is not as good as rapid fire cannon, but still pretty good. So I like to leave my options open there.
Makes sense. All right, so you have the option to take another bow, and I guess we'll have to wait and see what you do because your last pick, technically, it looks like. Is the bow kind of what you're hoping for? It got taken, but is that kind of what you were hoping for?
100%. Very sad that I didn't get the bow there.
Makes sense. You got a rod, which I suppose is something. Rod is always going to be useful in some capacity.
Exactly, and I know that I have a sword. So worst case scenario from this point is I make a Gunblade on Jace. Gunblade is super high impact on Jace.
Right. It's a big chunk of healing when he hits with that.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, especially if he has
what do you think about Nautilus right now? Because when set 3.5, excuse me, first came out, I looked at Nautilus and I'm like, all right, he's a star less. He doesn't do as much damage, but he does do some pretty effective crowd control. And his cast comes out quicker than Jace's because he doesn't have to do the big like combat flip or whatever. So do you think there's a world where Nautilus becomes the tank that you itemize over Jace, because even though he does slightly less damage, he would do more crowd control, and you want to keep that going?
No, I think Jace is still super good. I think he's still pound for pound one of the best 3 costs, because he just has really high damage ultimate. And in a situation where you can stack him, he basically functions as a 4 cost here. In fact, in this situation, he's almost as potent as a cast. So I would say Nautilus kind of does his job irrespective of what items you have on him, because the items don't really help him scale outside of tank items, right? Like a tank item helps him get more ults off, but he's not going to do that much more damage off an Ionic Spark or something relative to like a Jace. Right. So I generally treat Nautilus as at most a utility item holder, like maybe hold a redemption. So he gets his ult off a little bit faster and then he dies.
That makes sense. Okay. So you swapped out the Poppy 2 for the Wukong 2. So obviously you're giving up a little bit of tankiness, but you gain crowd control with that. You didn't do it right away though. So like, what prompted the decision to swap the 2 cost or the 2-star 1 cost tank for the 1-star 4 cost tank?
I think I probably just should have done it immediately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think Wukong 1 is just way higher impact than Poppy 2. It's provided the rest of my front line is tanky enough, and the rest of my front line was tanky enough. Poppy 2, I would only be playing over a Wukong 1 if I only had like 2 tanks and the other was 1-star. Then I probably don't want 2 1-stars as my front line.
Yeah,
but,
that makes sense.
But with 4 Vanguard, there's so much beefiness already, and I also have 4 Mystic that I don't really need the Poppy anymore.
All right. And you're at the point where, as soon as you find that Lulu, basically, you can swap out the Nocturne and put that in. But for now, you're kind of still benefiting a little bit from the Battlecast trait. So
exactly.
So you're hoping for a bow, obviously, out of the Infiltrators, or the Arc Raptors, rather. What else are you hoping for out of this?
A Zephyr wouldn't be bad here. So another belt wouldn't be bad. Zephyr is just a really potent item late game. Besides that, I mean, I have my triple items on Jace. If I don't get a bow here, what I probably do is I can go ahead and slam like a Chalice now, right? Because we hit the tier. And maybe I put that on maybe like Karma, so she's giving a little bit of extra AP to our cast, or maybe Soraka, so we get a little more healing. And I leave the spot open for cast. But yeah, there's nothing that would be like a huge hit besides Rapid Fire Cannon. Zephyr would probably have been the next best thing.
That makes sense. Have you ever found yourself forgoing the Rapid Fire Cannon for like a QSS or something like that?
I haven't personally. I find for Cass, usually the issue isn't her getting CC'd. Especially with blue buff and how low her mana pool is. She usually gets plenty of ults off. It's more just her getting killed. And the thing with QSS is Vanguard Mystic, the fights last long, so the relative value of QSS is even lower because it times out, I think 10 seconds into a fight.
Yeah.
So I'm not a huge fan of QSS personally. I'd rather just give her more straight up damage, so the ult she does get off are like almost guaranteed to kill off a unit, which is the case if she gets a death cap.
So when you play Vanguard Mystic, how often do you find yourself getting the Cassiopeia 3? Because I feel like whenever I see people prioritize trying to do that, they always like top 8, basically.
I almost never 3-star the cast.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had pretty good results with Vanguard Mystic. I think if I'm given like tons of casts, then I'll chase it, but it's generally not something that I chase as a win condition. I would rather go for a Thresh and Urgot, which is much easier and much more consistent to hit. And also gives you the benefit of going 9. And if anything, 9 at least gives you one more unit, to take aggro and, maybe get an ability off.
Makes a lot of sense. Knocking the first person out of the lobby, always a good feeling. And now you're number 1. You've been number 1 in the lobby for a while, about 20 HP lead, which is pretty huge. So let's talk a bit about playing from ahead. when, you know, most of the time when you're playing TFT, just in a given game, everyone's playing form behind, right? Oh, and there's the Urgot as well. But what is your kind of general, again, like broad strokes philosophy for playing from ahead?
Yeah, so the biggest decisions are scouting. Scouting becomes incredibly important in stage 5. I mean, it's always important, but stage 5 in particular,
Mm-hmm.
it's hugely important. And also having good judgment on whether to go 9 and if so, when, versus just rolling. So in a situation like this, I'm like, okay, well, I'm really strong right now, but I still don't have 4 Mystic. And there's another Vanguard Mystic player in the lobby. So I will need 4 Mystic at some point. So the question is, can I survive the rest of stage 5 with high HP and go 9 and complete my comp? Or do I need to roll at 8 to find Mystics?
Yeah.
Right? And what do I get for 8 versus 9? I would say in this case, there's actually a lot of room to grow at 8. And this loss right here, I don't actually remember what decision I made, but this loss might change my opinion on whether I'm strong enough to go 9. Right? Because this person, they beat me pretty hard there.
Yeah.
And I still have all level 1 Mystics too.
Yeah, I suppose that's kind of the tricky thing too, is that if you're leveling fast, you're bringing synergies online, of course, and all that, but you're generally lacking just pure power in your champions, right? You're going to be missing some 2 stars that you would have already had. And that's kind of the essence of TFT, right? Is that balance between when do I level, when do I roll down, where do I prioritize synergies, where do I prioritize multi-star units, you know?
Yeah. And for me, one of my weak points as a player that I'm working on, I've gotten significantly better, but it still needs some work, is judgment on whether to go 9.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, going 9 can be a big bait because 9 is really expensive, right? It's 66 gold to get to 9. And then you also need the gold to actually roll and find your stuff, right? So looking at this situation, I don't know if that's a 1-star Soraka, then what I can do is just choose to stay at 8 and roll down to get upgrades. I guess in this particular case, I determined because I hit the Urgot and I hit a redemption, those items gave me enough strength to go 9, and then look for my end game upgrades.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the other Vanguard Mystic player. He's got a couple more upgrades, and that is a very strong Jace, but your items tend to be a little bit better, it seems like.
Yeah, I think actually his Jace is level 1. Awesome.
Oh, yeah, you might be right. I might have missed that, but...
Yeah, so I think his Jace is 1, and my Jace is basically a Jace difference here.
Yeah.
Like, yes, he has rapid fire cannon on me, but it's not that big of a difference in the mirror matchup. It's more relevant when you're in a matchup where, you know, it's like a versus an enemy Cyber and you want to corner your Cassiopeia to keep her safe.
Right.
In a matchup where it's everyone's just hitting the front line, it's much less important to have a rapid fire cannon. So that in combination with me having a Jace 2 with Gunblade, which is much better than I think he had like a Bramble or Jeweled Gauntlet.
Yeah, Bramble, Jeweled Gauntlet, and I can't remember what the third one was.
Yeah, I think he had Ionic there or something.
Could be.
Yeah, made me confident in that matchup.
Makes sense. All right. Oh, snipers. Interesting. Not the greatest item for snipers, though. No tier or anything like that on the Teemo on the other side. Let me ask you quick. What do you think about snipers in the current meta? Because everyone was like, oh my gosh, Teemo OP, you know, when the set came out. And I tend to think it was just one of the comps that was just kind of figured out the earliest, right? Oh, poor Jin. And since then, it's kind of gone downhill, right?
Yeah, I think on the release week it was pretty strong. But I think a few things made it weaker. The rise of Vanguard Mystic very quickly made the comp obsolete because it made Jin obsolete almost without a Last Whisper. And then even with Last Whisper, it still became very difficult for Jin to kill anything. So it just became reliant on Teemo, and then Teemo didn't do very well versus Vanguard Mystic.
Mm-hmm.
And then Teemo also got nerfed, which actually was kind of odd to me. But I'm sure they had data to support that. But at high elo, Teemo is definitely not a problem at all. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not that good. I think there's a few players maybe who play it with some success. I'm not really sure how they do it. Maybe with just like immaculate positioning.
I think if you hit like the perfect items like really early, you can, you know, win streak enough with like a fast Teemo 2 to secure top 4 at least maybe. But yeah.
Yeah. I guess it has the benefit of being uncontested, right? So when everyone like there's like 3 players going for Jinx, 3 players going for Cyber. Sometimes all you need to do is just hit your units way before everyone to take a first. So I guess that's what you can do, but
Right.
it's definitely not a reliable first place comp.
That makes sense. So this is, I feel like, kind of the final form, right, of Vanguard Mystic. You've got the Thresh, you've got the Urgot on the bench. You know, this is it, right?
Yeah, and at this point, I'm more concerned about positioning. You can see that this guy, the enemy cast, is actually going for a cast 3, which is a little bit risky, but he's also really close,
Yeah.
right, to hitting it. So it's a little bit scary. At this point, I'm more just focused on scouting, though. Although in the replay, it doesn't look like I was scouting very much. And making sure that I'm correctly set up for every round.
Sure.
Because every round is like 20 to 30 damage at this point, potentially.
Right. And so even at 49 HP, you're essentially on like 2 to 3 lives at the most.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So a couple of Urgots on the bench, that always feels good, or feels bad for your opponent, depending on who you talk to. Let's address for a moment the Urgot controversy. Where do you stand on Urgot right now in TFT?
So I think he's incredibly obnoxious and unfun, but I don't think he's broken.
Okay.
I guess that manifests as his top end is super broken, but on average he's not super broken.
Right.
Because what'll happen is like occasionally you'll see an Urgot get a really nice ult on like a mech or something, right?
Yeah.
It's like a mech and that feels terrible.
Or like that right there.
Yeah, right that. Or he will ult like a full stack Riven or something like that.
Even the chat right there.
So he feels really bad, but as far as obnoxious mechanics go, this is one of the least obnoxious. Like when I compare this to Void Assassin or Phantom, this is nothing.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
and
Phantom,
honestly
dude. Oh man, don't get me started on Phantom.
Yeah, that was an ultimate tilter. Yeah. And I just don't think he's that strong on average by himself. I think he's really strong off the bench with Thresh specifically.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of similar thoughts with it. I love watching it. Like, here's where the caster comes out a little bit, and watching Urgot eat a carry is like, it will never not be entertaining, right? It's always one of the most fun things to see. But as a player, it agonizes me. But I agree. It's not reliably broken enough to really be super broken in my opinion right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of inherently inconsistent without rapid fire cannon.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes he just pulls in like a 100 HP remaining karma or something, and it's not that impactful.
So I'm a little bit surprised that this round went your way. It looked like after that Gnar ultimate, things were a bit dicey, but it ended up working out. Now we've got the 1v1 in the end. You've got a huge lead. So I'll ask the same question I asked a few rounds ago. Oh wow, there's the RFC for Cassiopeia. That looks great. How do you ensure now that you win the next round and win the game?
Yeah, so at this point, it's just thinking about like, hey, what's the most threatening thing he can do to me? And I would have to look at his board. Fortunately, he doesn't have a Zephyr. That probably would have been the most threatening thing. Yeah. The second most threatening thing would be Urgot Thresh synergy. So I would want to make sure that ideally my cast is on the opposite side of the enemy Thresh, so that even if the enemy Thresh pulls in an Urgot, it's as far away from my cast as possible.
Makes
right?
sense.
Because generally an Urgot coming off the bench is not going to have a rapid fire cannon, so they're just going to ult whoever's closest, which is going to be, and he has super short range. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since there's no Blitzcrank on the other side and no Zephyr, you're able to corner that Cassiopeia and really get the most out of the rage rapid fire cannon as well. Exactly.
And I actually can't emphasize enough how big the difference in itemization is between my Jace and his.
Seriously, yeah.
Right? Like, Bramble Vest is not an adequate replacement for GA.
Because that wasn't even close.
It's not even close, right? And in this particular matchup, Bramble Vest is not good at all.
So let's go back for a second, as we know the game is about to end, but let's pause for a second at the beginning of this round and just compare itemization. So your Jace has a Hextech GA and Ionic Spark. His Jace has the Bramble Jeweled Gauntlet Ionic Spark. So IS is good on all tanks. But let's talk about these items in particular. So why would you not want Bramble Vest Jeweled Gauntlet sometimes?
It's not that they're bad. It's more that I think Bramblevest is not that great on Jace because it's you can already pass a point of diminishing returns when you're already running 4 Vanguard, so the extra armor is not making him that much tankier.
Makes sense.
And um, he's not really getting focus. Like the reason it's good on mech is because the mech is both tanky and getting focused. So
Yeah.
he's rambling a lot of units. Whereas Jace is one of the 4 tanks who's all up in front line.
Right.
And then Jeweled Gauntlet is just meh. Even after the buff, it's still kind of meh. I guess if you have Infinity Edge, it's good. But it's just not going to be as effective for Jace as having a Gunblade, which allows him to just keep on, getting heals. So with Jace, you just wanted to get many ults off rather than having one really high impact ult late game.
So we're back after game number 2. I lost it a little bit at the end when the Lulu ulted Urgot still ate one of his champions. That just seeing it consumed into the tiny cupcake was hilarious to me. But I'll ask, what were your big takeaways from that game in particular? So it's a first, which is great, but what are your sort of thoughts about your play overall?
Yeah, so I think the reason that game is interesting is because it wasn't like a dominant first from stage 2, right? It was actually a game where we had to all in. So I think the key turning point in that game was when I chose to go 7 and just all in mid stage 3.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people can take away for themselves. I think a lot of people, they fall into like a pattern of, oh, I always level here, I always econ here, and that's not really how you should be playing the game, right? And I struggle with this, right? As someone who makes guides, right? When I make a guide, like I have recommendations for ideal things to do.
Yeah.
But TFT, you very rarely have an ideal scenario. And it's more about understanding the rationale for why certain decisions are correct in certain moments. So in that game, I was like 62 HP or something mid stage 3, and I didn't have a comp really coming together. So I was like, okay, I need to roll now to stabilize and treat this as if I'm playing for top 4. And it was only once I hit the Cassiopeias in that desperation roll down, and B, got good items that I could sort of change my strategy to going back to being more conservative with my economy.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess I'll ask the question that I ask all the pros I bring on the show, which is another very broad. I like very broad questions because then you kind of get a better sense of personality, right? Because everybody's going to answer something a little bit different in that situation. So I'll ask probably the broadest question there is with TFT is how do you see the state of teamfight tactics right now at a competitive level? Like, what do you think is strong as far as like ways to play compositions? What do you think is weak? What do you like about this set? What do you wish was a bit different? Like your general state of the game on TFT right now.
So first, I think this is by far the best set. I think there's very few frustrating mechanics. The only one, honestly, I can think of is Urgot, and I don't think it's frustrating OP. I think it's just frustrating. I think there's a lot of viable carries, both at 3 and 4 costs, right? Like you just saw me take a first place with Jace and Cass carrying.
Yeah.
You can play for first with Vayne carrying and Cybernetics. You can play for first with Jinx. So it feels like there's a lot of options in every game. I also think it's really fun to play, it's kind of tough. Like, hey, what defines fun? Fun is different for everyone, but for me, the units just feel good to watch and to play. Like Vayne is super cool. Jinx has really fun pop-off mechanic, and I'm really glad they brought her back. Echo is really cool, even though he does feel a little OP sometimes when he just like 100 to 0 as a carry. So I think the meta's really diverse, and you can win. I see different stuff winning pretty often in lobbies. And I also think, and I sort of like struggle with whether I think this is okay the way to play the game, but you can also one trick and have a reasonable amount of success.
True.
There was that guy, I think his name was Lee Randomly, who made it all the way to rank 3 on ladder. Pretty much, not even pretty much, I think he literally was playing Jinx every single game, which is pretty impressive considering that Jinx is a very contested unit.
Well, let's stop and touch on that for just a moment, if you don't mind. Jinx kind of feels like the new Kale almost, or the new Some Sins, you know, where it's like a unit you can play around, but you can build your composition very differently depending on the game.
I think it's a little bit different than Kale in that
Okay.
I think she's just in two compositions, right? And I think there's two compositions that are essentially the same. It's either Six Rebel or Brawler Blaster, and I think Brawler Blaster is usually the better of the two. The reason why I think Jinx is different from Kale is because Kale could sort of do her job with very few prerequisites. She could do it with a variety of different items from a variety of different positions, variety of different synergies. Whereas Jinx absolutely needs that minimum 3 rebels and absolutely needs a minimum 2 blaster and it absolutely needs a big front line.
Okay.
So I think she's similar in that she's like a super highly desired unit though, who is going to be contested every single game. And it's interesting seeing them trying to adjust her to a place where she feels less dominant, because she completely outshines certain champions like Jhin.
Yeah,
right?
true.
I think the place of any carry who's going to be doing an area of effects mixed damage it's going to be really hard to balance them against the other units. So I think it's fine. Like I don't think she's oppressive or anything. It is kind of silly to see like 4 people going for Jinx and then they pivot into something else if they can't hit Jinx. But overall, I think she feels pretty fair because there's a lot of prerequisites you need for her to carry.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So please continue then if you had any closing thoughts on the rest of the state of TFT.
Yeah, overall, I think it's really good. I think the balance team has clearly been learning and making better and better decisions with what mechanics to have versus not have. There's a lot less randomness in terms of how the units behave, which makes it it just feels like you have way more agency. Right?
Much better from a competitive sense too. The less
exactly.
randomness, the better. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's certain randomness that's okay. Like it's okay that it's random whether you get the unit that you're looking for or not. But when you have like an Azir one-shotting a backline unit, that felt super bad. Versus
those are the days, yeah.
Exactly. And even something like Urgot, right? As unfair as he can feel sometimes, you know what he's gonna do, right? He's gonna ult the closest unit and auto kill them. He's not gonna randomly ult your backliner.
Right. You can play around it to a certain degree, although things move around and move up and back and all that. But still, you know what he's gonna do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say right now, someone who's serious about the competitive side, it feels like a very fair game. And it doesn't feel like I'm at the whim of like RNG in a given fight. Like It's very rare that I look at a given fight and say, oh wow, I just got unlucky, right? As opposed to, no, I could have moved this unit 1 hex over to the left, I could have dodged a shroud, I could have played Zephyr better. There's pretty much feels like there's always something better to do.
Awesome. All right. I agree. I love the game right now. I think it's the best it's ever been. Having played since set 1, it's cool to hear some of the top players kind of saying those same things, because the experience. I mean, I hit Masters last before the soft reset, but that's still a big difference from like Masters to Challenger. There's a big gap there, so it's good to hear people at the top saying similar things. But that's about it for us. So it's time to make your shout outs. Like, where can people find your stuff? Obviously, we can find your guides on Reddit, but talk about your social medias. I've got your Twitter at the bottom of the screen, but give us the other stuff.
Yeah, so I stream 6 days a week on twitch.tv/thatsPRIMAL. So you can catch me there, and I try to focus on a mix of entertainment and education, try to really make sure that I talk about my thought process and review games to see what went wrong so I can try to improve both for myself and for viewers. I have a YouTube channel. If you just Google YouTube, that's Primal. You can find me posting content there several times a week, all with a focus on education, as well as some personal content just about my journey in case people are interested in following that. So pretty much anywhere, that's Primal.
Awesome. Cool. Well, like I said, one of the most analytical, thoughtful people to approach the game right now. So it's been great having you on the show. Thanks for all your insight and for hanging out a little bit. And that'll do it. So from ggDoA and Primal, thanks for watching Galaxy Brain, guys. If you like it, hit the subscribe button. You know, all that YouTube stuff. I hate it all, but just go follow all the stuff. I just make stuff for fun anyway. But thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.